Welcome to the Pimcore Inspire presentation of Alumio. Today we're going to talk about how to connect Pimcore with Alumio's iPaaS solution. I'm joined here by Casper, CEO of Alumio, and Henk, Director of Products from UE. Casper, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm the CEO and founder of Alumio. Alumio is an integration platform as a service. It's a middleware that sits in between systems. It can connect to Pimcore, to the GraphQL interfaces of the product, and connect it to your other channels like eCommerce or marketplaces and so on. Basically anything that is relevant for the use case of the companies who use Pimcore. We founded Alumio during the time that I ran an agency. So my background is from eCommerce, a technical agency specialized in Magento web development. And we were always having these problems on how to connect systems. So we have this point-to-point integrations between Magento and all kinds of ERP systems. And we kind of had like one way to do it, but it was always point-to-point. And when Magento 2 came around back in 2015, we started rethinking about how could we improve integrations for the future and also overcome like the next 5 to 10 years with software. And that's the reason why we started creating Alumio as a middleware platform that's able to give the user the ability to connect to the interfaces, to the APIs of third-party systems. So we give our users, we give them ownership on the integrations. And also great maintainability capabilities and monitoring capabilities. So that's my background.
Yeah, and Henk, you're working for UE, a full service deals agency, and you're both partner of Alumio and Pimcore.
Yes.
So how
proud to say strategic partner for Pimcore and enterprise partner for Alumio. So we're in the right spot to be talking about these issues. And I think from a similar background, we run a lot of projects. Every project requires integration, and integration used to be our nightmare and stuff that was chasing us always. And with Alumio, we found a solution that gives us that better maintainability and better integration, better quality. So that's why we love to use it in our projects.
Okay, great. So first we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of integrating Pimcore with a system such as Alumio. But Casper, can you maybe collaborate a little bit about what an iPaaS solution is?
That's a great question, and there are lots of terms in the market that people kind of recognize. One of them is like the traditional ESB or a data hub or integration platform. An integration platform as a service is basically a piece of software that sits in the cloud. We offer that as a single tenant solution, so it's set up for the customer in a dedicated, isolated environment. And so the company that uses Alumio, they don't have to worry about hosting or infrastructure, all these details we cover, which are I name them like details, but they're actually very important for running a successful piece of software in the cloud. But we offer a product as a service, and the user can log in and configure or maintain integrations with 2 or a multitude of systems.
And with both Pimcore and Alumio, you're able to process a high value of product data?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, so Pimcore is is a beautiful piece of software that allows the user to configure complex data models, and it's being used throughout lots of markets, lots of industries, and especially when the complexity of data is quite high, and they have built this beautiful way of exposing data to the outside of the platform via their GraphQL layer. But that means that the data is available, but the data is not in the system where it should end up. And with Alumio, you connect to those GraphQL endpoints and translate it to the right API endpoint of the third-party system.
Hank, do you also see that with the customers that you're involved with who are both using Pimcore and Alumio, that there are great benefits of using both solutions? Or
Yes, there are great benefits of using both solutions. What we typically see with a Pimcore project is that it's not standard. So we have different entities, different data models. So it's not something that is an out-of-the-box configuration. It always needs integration with a commerce platform, where it is a commerce project. And of course also integration with ERP, with pricing, with stock. So those all tie together within the integration platform, being Alumio, that first of all allows the data to be structured and handled in a unified way, but also gives us the capabilities of basically transforming data when needed, have proper monitoring on importing data into platforms, which is normally lacking. One of the big things that you want to do with importing data is actually see where it fails, and you don't want it to see failing with a whole import failing, but you want to see a record failing. And I don't want to see that in a technical log where I have to explain someone to access an FTP to look into whatever. You want a graphical user interface telling you what failed, and that will give you the options to push the data again and be able to fix it as a user. I think that's the number one
is
benefit.
this what we call data validation? Is that
Data validation is part of that. That's where you would use the transformation. If you set up a data model in Pimcore, you set it up using certain restrictions on the data. And the data coming into such a platform doesn't necessarily comply with the model that you've set up. So you need a way to validate whether that data is correct. And if it's incorrect, you can transform in the integration layer or fix it in the source. So there's different ways of handling that. But that's one of the main things with integrations. And the bad thing about data failing is that there is a returning issue. So it's not we built a system once, we have a couple of failures and it never comes back, but it comes back every week, every day. And it keeps coming back, and our customers keep saying, why do I keep spending money on an importer that you've built?
Yeah.
Well, you've changed the data.
So don't change the data model.
Yeah. So we want to stay away from that.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest benefit when using Pimcore, integration with all of these systems. But also data needs to get into Pimcore, needs to be onboarded from vendors. So there's a lot of validation there.
Yeah.
We can use importers with Pimcore, and they do some form of validation within the data model. And when it doesn't comply, it fails, which is useless to a user. So you want to be able to use a platform to validate data. If it's wrong, transform, push it again, and be in control of the data as a user instead of a developer.
Yeah, so you want to log into Alumio and search for like an SKU or like a number of a product and search for it because you have the feeling that something went wrong with processing it from Pimcore to another system. And being able to quickly identify what happened, what went wrong, gives the company also more ownership of their integration instead of having to call a developer that needs to dive into the code or log into any SFTP environment whatsoever. And another important thing I think is being able to queue data, because a lot of the companies that you work with, they have like large numbers of products in their Pimcore. And if you would push that to a platform like Magento or any kind of e-commerce platform, you will most likely flood the system and it will break, or it will at least decrease the performance of the platform. And with Alumio, you can also configure the frequency and also how many records it will push to another channel per time.
Yeah, I think customers with up to 1 million SKUs were the exception in the past, but with consolidation, that's becoming the norm. So it's a daily headache, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, Casper, another benefit of using Alumio is that you don't need any custom coding, and you don't need developers as much as you would like or have now. How is that going? How does it work exactly then?
Yeah. Well, you still need smart people, bright people who are able to think in a technical way. You can call them functional developers. But I think traditionally these connections were built point to point with custom coding somewhere, or maybe some prefabricated coding or some extensions or plugins. And usually you'll end up changing them because it solves a certain problem, and then you're going to set up the connection between Pimcore and another system, and then it fails, and you need to dive into the code and expand that and change that and tweak that. And that's a very time-consuming process. So with Alumio, you'll be able to configure the integration. You don't need to program. We call it low code. So there are still, you can still use a query. You can still use some like variables or more technical stuff, but it's all in the user interface. So everything that used to be done within code is now visible. And so that gives the ownership to the user, but it also gives them insights. And the default stuff like mapping fields, which is a very common thing, it's all there. You don't need to write code. And that's
also the big difference we see, is that it moves from people living in code, developers, to consultants, people living in data and understanding what they're dealing with, and then being in control of that data. I think that's the biggest benefit we see.
It's a different mindset. And so I absolutely agree. And it's if you look at mapping data or restructuring data, it's great. What we see in practice, that a lot of the companies, they collaborate with a partner like UE, and they set up an initial integration. But as Hank mentioned, like their data model is changing, and it benefits everybody if they could also do things themselves. So educating our users, benefits the companies, but also benefits the partner, because you don't have any black box issues anymore, where the customer says it's not working, and the partner says, yeah, that's because you changed the data model.
Yeah, that's what we would like to stay out of the daily operation, is something that the customer should handle, because it's their business, it's their day-to-day thing, and it's not something that we see as part of the project. We'd rather build new features and add value than fix stupid imports.
And often people in their digital transformations or throughout the years, they're just adding certain systems and platforms and tooling, or they're using a different system and want some new plugins. But how do you make sure with Alumio that everything stays connected and structured? Because mostly what we can see in the digital world and during the digital transformations is that people often have a very messy IT landscape.
Well, I totally agree, and I recognize the problem. And especially if you look at the last 10 years, you see this enormous increase of software being added to the landscape of companies.
Yes.
Because back in the days you just needed an ERP, and you needed an e-commerce platform, and you can do your business. And then companies like Pimcore were providing new software and giving companies new tools to accelerate their growth. But if you put it in a diagram and you're going to connect all these systems point to point, you get this spider web or spaghetti soup of integrations. And at that point, when you want to change software, interchange software, or plug in new software, things are going to conflict. And with Alumio, we give the user the ability to map to a certain structure within Alumio. And a lot of these data entities, like the product data is quite complex, but there's still like a default product model which you can use as a data structure. And from that point, you can map to other systems. And if you do that in if you commit to those entities, like an order schema or a customer schema, it will give you the ability to change 50% of your integration if you want to change your ERP system, or if you want to change your e-commerce platform. And this is for us a way to offer future-proof integrations.
How important is that, Hank, for customers, to have a structured IT landscape that is
that's
flexible.
very important
for
when
future.
interchanging things. When for being in control of data, you need to understand where it flows. And
Yeah.
within spaghetti, you don't know where it flows. You need to get that one spaghetti string out, and then you're left with all the rest. So that's not going to work. But also in standardizing to certain schemas, we have different entities, different data models that we can use within Pimcore. But when it ends up in a commerce platform, the data model of commerce platforms, 99% uses exactly the same. So that's something we can map against. And even ERP systems. So there's different systems that have standard schemas that Alumio deploys for using these standard connections. And I think most situations map to the standard schemas. We try to make it work that way because that makes it interchangeable. Also make sure that we can change one commerce front end to another without changing the whole architecture.
Okay, is that also why we want to avoid point-to-point integrations?
Yes.
Can you elaborate
That was
a
a
little
nice close question. Yes.
Can you tell
There's
a bit
only
more
one answer
about,
possible.
about how Pimcore then is used with multi-software integrations?
You can use it in different ways. Where the way it is, I think, used by a lot of people is have point-to-point direct integrations. And I think Pimcore is mainly built on the fact that every integration is custom. So it provides the standard tools to be able to do it. It made a big jump with the GraphQL Data Hub with standard, again, mappings to schemas. There's the integration with ProductShop. That's out of the box. It sort of maps to a standard schema that ProductShop is using. We're doing the same with Alumio. So in that way, it becomes a very structured landscape.
Yeah, because if we look at how your infrastructure is using the ERP to Pimcore, but also Pimcore then to the e-commerce platform, how...
There's no single way of integrating ERP with PIM with commerce.
No?
Every company has a different way of starting with a product. Depends on if I'm a manufacturer, I want to start a product in a PIM or product lifecycle management solution because I'm working on it way before it becomes a product that needs to be bought or sold.
Yes.
If I'm a wholesaler, I don't care. It becomes a product when I can buy and sell it. So it starts in ERP. And so there's different ways of processes and flows that you have within the company. The integrations need to match those processes. You don't provide a system and say, okay, now you need to change all your processes because we built you this system that forces you to do this and have the flow from A to Z in this way. That's not the way the world works.
And each system has its own capabilities of integrating. So, and there are so many ERP systems out there, so many variants, so many versions, subversions, and all of these ERP systems, they can either be online, like in the cloud, but a lot of them are still on premises. And being able to offer a generic way of connecting to those systems is also a very powerful thing. So we are extracting a lot of the complexity from that part by offering a standard solution to that. And if we're talking about product master data, I think a lot of Pimcore users are having these. The product master data is not sitting in one system. It comes from different. It is being aggregated, right? Yeah. So it's nearly impossible if you're going to. You can't standardize that, but you can use certain schemas and certain product models, making sure that you're as an agency, because you need to redo that process every time for every customer again, that you work towards a more standardized way of importing data and exporting data.
And how does the customer itself deal with that?
Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, you just mentioned that if an agency needs to do that for multiple customers, how can the customer make sure to keep involved in that process and make sure they're doing it right?
That's their nice black box that they bought and don't have control of and keep calling us and it doesn't work, what happened? And that's why you want to change to they purple, what is the colored box, and have control over what's happening. You do that with the GUI of Alumio.
I think that's also the responsibility of a partner, is that they will provide you with the right consult on how to properly prepare your data, but also how to properly set up a model that allows you to scale in the future. And I think it's fairly easy to use a product in a less efficient way. So I think it's all about having the right people working on your Pimcore environment.
Yeah. Yeah, because if we look at, we talked already about the importance of data and good data and data validation. But if you look at how important it is to improve things like incrementals or queuing, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, I think, so for example, if you would get product master data from an ERP, and the only way that the ERP can provide the data is through files, then with Alumio, you can pick up the files from somewhere and store them within Alumio and redo that process every couple of hours, that maybe once a day or every 3 hours. And it will import the data. It will compare it with the previous import, and then only, Alumio actually finds the changed entities or the deleted entities and only process that to the endpoint. In this case, Pimcore, for example. So you can also make sure that you're not set. With that process, you're creating efficient integrations, and I also think that's very important for scalability and for, additional things like resources and infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that's a very important one, because the number of SKUs is getting bigger and bigger. ERP systems still cannot give a proper timestamp on a product because it's a relational data model. So the answer to providing that is no, and then it's really good to have a system like Alumio where you can simply say, okay, this is my data I'm getting in today, this is what I had, and this is the difference, and push that to the commerce platform that normally cannot handle 1 million SKUs on a daily basis. And you want to deal with those changes maybe on an hourly or a quarterly basis. So that's the only way to really deal with these issues.
Yeah, and for let's say you want to push your products to the e-commerce platform, but you also want to push it to your channel broker, like Channel Engine, for example, that allows you to sell on any kind of marketplace. Then then the efficient integration between Pimcore and your channels is also very important. So I think it's also good to address that it allows you to reuse the data that you use, like your product model, for different purposes.
And then Alumio also has its own product data model. What's the benefit of using that?
Yeah, so a lot of so the product model that we offer, for example, because in this case we're talking about the product model, is a standard within Alumio. So it's in the heart of Alumio, let's say. And a lot of the partners that we work with, they create their own connectors. And the connectors, they can be placed into Alumio, and it will simplify setting up a connection with a third-party system. Let's say Magento or BigCommerce or any kind of platform. And if the ecosystem commits to a standard, you can validate if Alumio gets the right data, but you're also making things more like you have the connector and you have the plug. That's the socket. So the socket and the plug. That's the right wording. So it simplifies the integrations over time, and it also supports interchangeability between systems.
And there's also a default product model for Pimcore users?
Yeah, I think that's more your cup of tea, because we were having this discussion about product models, but also product complexity.
Yeah. Basically, the schema that Alumio is using is providing you the standard product data model. And we try to map against that data model whenever we can. Of course, a data model like that is extendable, so I can add fields, but I don't want to change the structure, because changing the structure will not allow to make changes in the future. So if I want to be able to connect on multiple platforms, then I want to stick to that structure and maybe just add what I need on top of that. And that would work not just with commerce, also with ERP. We're now talking mainly products because we're talking Pimcore, but the same goes for orders, the same goes for customers. There's standard models and standard ways that these data models are used in platforms. And I think 95% comply with those standards and have extendable models based on that. So if you stick to that modeling, you make an interchangeable platform.
And then if you just look at Pimcore as a solution, you can have multiple different solutions within Pimcore itself. Does every solution Pimcore offers needs a new data model, or is it just one?
There's multiple entities. If I have different entities for products, which we use in a lot of cases, you still want to map those against the standard product data model. But there's also customer entities in Pimcore, which you can map against standard customer and company data models. There's in the Pimcore eCommerce framework, there's an order data model. So there's again these standard data models that can be employed. Then on top of that, we always say Pimcore is like Lego. You can make whatever you want with it. So we can also create data models that don't fit any standard, but they are created because they don't fit any standard.
We adopted a standard in the market, another standard in the market called schema.org. So it's a JSON-based structure, very familiar and favorable with a lot of technical people. So I think that's a good. I think what you're pointing out is actually very interesting. How can you do something complex with Pimcore, but still keep in mind that you want to have it standardized in a way. It's an interesting domain, but I think a very relevant one, because if you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time again.
No, you want to stick to standards as much as you can until you can't. And when you can't, you shouldn't.
Okay. And if we're looking at purely the benefits of using an integration platform and Pimcore for your data, what are ready benefits to name? Or is it a faster time to market? What can we tell about that?
Continue.
You're the experts here.
Faster time to market. I think it's also lowering the total cost of ownership. I think a lot of companies, they don't have the data to actually know how much is spent on the long-term investment on software, but also custom coding. So with Alumio, you can lower your total cost of ownership. You're reducing the threshold for technical competence, so it's also more accessible for the less technical people. And what I personally find important, and then I'll leave the other benefits up to you. I think a lot of times, and especially when I look at the days in my agency, our customers, they didn't have ownership of the integration, and they felt like left in the dark. Who should they call when something went wrong? And we give back that ownership. We give back the ability to do things with the integrations themselves, whether it's monitoring or notification or identify problems, resolving problems. So I think to me that's a very important value.
Yeah, I think that greatly sums it up. Control for the end customer, for the real user. I think for us as an agency, in the end, we have the same benefits as the end customer. So allowing them to be in control of the data and be in control of the daily business provides value. In the end, that's what a digital agency is about. But we also come from fixing a lot of those stupid issues and not giving control to the customer where they should have control. And they're always calling in the morning early to find out why something didn't happen, which is sort of a waste of all of our time. If they can call, they can also push a button and try the data again, or make a little change and push it and be in control of their daily business.
Is it maybe also overlooked often by customers, the whole structured IT landscape bit?
Greatly overlooked. I often ask new prospects what the quality of the data is. Their answer is always, it's good, we've looked after it and it should give you no worries. I've yet to find the first customer where they don't have data issues and we have no worries. There's no such thing.
So we're not solving that problem.
No. Yeah, but if you have a better insight on your data and you know exactly which systems and tools is providing which data, then that's something you will improve from as a company.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I said it before, being in control over data allows you to focus on added value. And in the end, that's what we all want to do.
Exactly. I think that's it then. Or do any of you have anything to add?
I think you wrapped it up perfectly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'd leave it like that.
Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any other questions, please reach out and contact either Casper from Alumio or Henk from UE. And that's it. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.